All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Still Curtain podcast. I am your host for today, normally your co-host, Shayne Kubas, copy editor and contributor for Still Curtain and Fin Fanatic. And joining me as my co-host today, while Tommy Jagai is out doing his own thing, getting away from this while he can still before things get too insane, is Jacob Harrison, contributor to Still Curtain, and more importantly nowadays, site expert for Buffalo Down for Buffalo Bills. How you doing, Jacob?
I'm doing great. If it makes Steelers fans feel any better, Buffalo has had just as turbulent and chaotic an offseason as Pittsburgh has.
You're telling me. Yeah, but two long time, not quite as long time for Sean McDermott because it doesn't get any more long time than Mike Tomlin, but two long time head coaches stepped down, or in his case, McDermott's case, fired very unceremoniously and just a whole thing. But yeah, if you want to check out anything going on with the Buffalo Bills, if you happen to care, Jacob definitely is someone you can go to for that type of stuff, and definitely check the site out. But we are focusing on Steelers stuff today. Definitely some things to talk about. We are kind of in this weird post-Super Bowl, NFL Combine / other important NFL dates period, but we do have stuff to talk about. And one thing in particular is going to be our main topic that, Jacob, you know how I feel about it. I think I know how you feel about it. I know how Tommy feels about it. So we can definitely kind of talk for him. I think we can, we'll be able to talk about what he thinks about it too, because it's very similar. Right. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Let's start with some trending NFL news. We'll save the biggest news, Steelers related, for last year because it just happened recently today, and it's a doozy. We'll get into that. But first thing, this is the last major coaching hire that the Steelers made since our last show on Wednesday. They did fill the OC spots. Steelers hiring Brian Angelichio, I think is how you say it, or Angelica. I really haven't found out for sure yet. Not heard him say his name or anyone else say his name out loud, frankly. But he is coming over from the Vikings to be the OC for the Steelers. How do you feel about this one, Jacob?
I don't know. I feel like I got this whole tight end spiel last offseason, right?
Yeah.
Because he's got some experience with tight ends.
He does.
Yep. That was supposed to be a big deal last year, and somehow Pat Freiermuth ended up being a non-factor. Jonnu Smith caught a fraction of the passes he caught in Miami, and Darnell Washington is an offensive tackle who's, the most impressive pass catcher of the trio. I don't know. Like, on one hand, Mike McCarthy, he's an offensive mastermind. He's got the respect that he's due in that regard, and he's worked with Angelico before.
Yeah.
And with the tight end aspect, and he's had fantastic tight ends in that space before. And obviously you don't have to worry about Angelico calling the plays. That's still McCarthy, but
yeah,
it's still one of those moves. It just doesn't really move the needle a whole lot, as opposed to maybe some of his other coaching hires. But it's not one of those hires that you're going to get, oh, this is the answer, this is the thing that we feel great about. Like, it's just the guy that he went with, and we're going to have to see how it unfolds, because we've been sold, false goods for a few years in a row now. So it's hard to even gauge the expectations to put on this kind of offensive coordinator hire.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Mike McCarthy is going to be the play caller for this team. He made that very clear in his opening press conference. There's been no reason to think that's going to change. He's going to come in here to assist him with game planning, I'm sure, help coordinate certain parts of the passing game, most likely. Probably essentially be the tight ends coach from what I've heard. I don't think they're going to necessarily have a dedicated tight ends coach as far as I know. So, he will still be focusing on a lot of the same things that he did with the Vikings, where he was the passing game coordinator and tight ends coach there. And I will say, coming from the Vikings, if McCarthy is willing and able to adapt some of the things that the Vikings do offensively, that probably isn't a bad thing, because outside of being forced to start J.J. McCarthy, the Vikings offense has been very good while Kevin O'Connell's been there, right? So there is something to that, I suppose. But again, with him not calling plays, this is a role that is very different than, say, if we had hired him with Tomlin still here or with a defensive head coach. So definitely going to be interesting to see if he can add anything. And yeah, the tight end room, it's something. There's talent there.
It should be elite.
Yeah, can we do something with it? Yeah. Hopefully, Jonnu Smith wasn't on this team, frankly, because of what he looked like last year. But the guys that are there, hopefully he can get something out of them. So we'll see, though. But I do think it's interesting. Speaking of the staff, though, in general, as of right now, as far as I can tell, Mike McCarthy's staff is the biggest staff in Steelers history, which isn't necessarily that surprising because they have had very small staffs historically. But the fact that they hired Mike McCarthy was a surprise to begin with, but then also giving him a lot of leeway to hire guys and to bring in more coaches than we normally see is at least in some ways a little bit helpful. I think it does make me feel a little bit better about the direction of it, mostly because assuming Mike McCarthy isn't the coach for this team past at least the contract he's currently on, maybe whoever they hire in the future will also be given that same luxury.
Bigger isn't always better.
It's not all the time.
But yeah. I'll say this kind of goes in line with some of the feelings of the entire, Tomlin to McCarthy exchange to begin with, because the Steelers went away from what they have done since before, I'm going to go ahead and assume our parents were born, because it was before mine were born, and they just went away from it by hiring McCarthy in the first place. So if you're going to go away from what has worked for the past 60 years, I guess go full force and go hire a bigger coaching staff. I will say that was one of my bigger gripes with Tomlin, is just the fact that the coaching staff beyond him always seemed to not be that big of a factor. They didn't want to spend the money, and they didn't want to let go of guys who clearly had failed in their roles. Matt Canada, it's on one hand, sure, let's see how it goes, but on the other, we're still Steelers fans, man. We still have that aspect of tradition that we like to hold on to. So when we see all this different kind of change, and we've seen some different kind of changes over the past few years, and they haven't really worked out, it starts to get well, at what point are you guys just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks? And at what other point are you, actually just evolving and trying to catch up to what the rest of the NFL is doing? Because what you've done for the past 60 years hasn't always worked out the way you wanted to, especially over the past 20.
Yeah, and it's tough because, as you said, bigger isn't always better when it comes to coaching staff. So I think it depends on the quality, obviously, of coaches matters much more than the amount of them that you have. It's nice to have assistants that can help the main position coach, or that can be better teachers and help guys more directly one-on-one, because it's hard to find time for that whenever you have a smaller staff and they're in charge of a whole position and things of that nature. I get that. But this won't matter unless the coaches are, again, actually really good at what they do. And I have reason to think that some of the coaches they hired will be really good at what they do and could end up helping this team a lot, especially with the defensive hiring of Patrick Graham at DC. That is something I'm very curious to see kind of what he does with this group as it continues to age, unfortunately, and is very expensive. How much can he get out of that group as it is? We'll see. But that, I do think, obviously matters a lot more than just the size of the staff. So
right.
For sure. Before we get to the biggest news from today, let's talk a little bit about the biggest game of the year. Seahawks defeat Patriots 29-13 to win Super Bowl 60. And it was a defensive struggle for the vast majority of it, and it kind of still was even at the end. We finally got a little bit more scoring with the touchdown from Sam Darnold to A.J. Barner, of all people. If you had that as your Super Bowl touchdown, good for you.
I wish I did. I'm a huge AJ Barner stan.
He's a good player.
He's fantastic.
If I was betting who was the only one to catch a touchdown for Seattle, probably not have been AJ Barner. So, but good for him. But obviously they had the score on defense as well. Kenneth Walker could have made this an even bigger blowout, but they called his touchdown run at the end of the game back. So, but this was a pretty thorough beatdown by the Seahawks, which is what a lot of us expected. I will just say I went out on a limb and said that, the Seahawks are probably going to win. That's kind of where everyone was going with this one. And it did play out that way. But just any thoughts on the Super Bowl? Someone who your team that you're covering now has a better chance than the Steelers do, probably playing in a game like this soon, but still not something we've experienced for quite some time.
I'm learning there's not much difference between Bills Mafia and Steelers Nation. I'm telling you that.
Yeah,
no, but the Steelers the Patriots getting blown out in the Super Bowl. You love to see it.
It's not something you hate as a Steelers fan, probably not.
I mean, props to the Seahawks, man. They got the revenge for what year was it? 48 Super Bowl 48, I think.
Yeah, it was 2014, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but they got the revenge on that. Patriots don't leapfrog the Steelers in Lombardies.
Yeah.
The Patriots are good. They're back. They're not dynasty back, but they are back in the picture. And it's one more team that the Steelers have to contend with. going forward. But Seahawks, man, that defense, Mike McDonald, I'm so glad. Listen, if there's one thing that you can be happy with, I think it's the fact that the Ravens didn't have the Bills idea to keep their coordinator and just make him the head coach. Because if Mike McDonald was in Baltimore, bro, like it's bad enough they got Jesse Minter, but Mike McDonald is a fantastic head coach, and he's up there in Seattle. Nobody knows his name. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it easily could have happened too, and like obviously like the circumstances were a little bit different. The Ravens had just gone to like the AFC title game,
right?
Whenever McDonald was hired that offseason by the Seahawks 2 years ago, but like if it would have happened, who knows what we'd be looking at right now in the North. So it's certainly, and again, Minter might be able to bring a lot of the same stuff, so we'll have to see how that plays out, but at least the last 2 years it wasn't the case. So hopefully get a chance here.
Took full advantage of that,
Definitely took not the same thing for 10 years. Anyway, no, we'll talk about that more in a minute.
Right.
But last thing on our news here before we get to our really biggest topic of the day. Joey Porter on Cam Hayward's Not Just Football podcast goes off on former players' criticism of Mike Tomlin, and specifically 2 players. He mentioned James Harrison, who has been very vocal about Mike Tomlin since he was fired, and even before I shouldn't say fired, before he stepped down, and before he even stepped down, he was critical of this past season and what he's done for a while. And Ben Roethlisberger, similarly, both have kind of been on the train of like, Tomlin needs to go and all this stuff, and have said some things that definitely rubbed Joey Porter the wrong way. We'll just say that. Specifically, I want to talk about what he said about Ben, because with James Harrison, he basically talked about, Mike Tomlin made him as a player. Cowher cut him multiple times. It was Tomlin that got him to be the player that we know him as now, and as someone who is going to go down in Steelers history. Obviously got the Defensive Player of the Year in 2008, like stuff like that. Like he basically was like, how are you going to criticize this guy who really kind of made you as a player and is why you're known as Debo, not just James Harrison, right? Like that's kind of what his thoughts were, which is, I do think is a fair criticism there, is even if we kind of, as a group here with Steel Curtain, tend to agree that Tomlin's time was up and he did need to change things or step down, and that's what happened. But his thoughts on Ben Roethlisberger, I want to read some of what he said about him. That's the one that is kind of causing a little bit of a firestorm, I think, with the fans right now. So, let me just jump into some of what he said. So 7 talking about Ben Roethlisberger broke the brotherhood because the stuff that 7 did do and that he did that we don't talk about is crazy. Out of anybody that should talk, he should never grab a microphone and really talk Steeler business, because if we're talking Steeler business, he basically said he's foul of all foul. He basically called him a bad teammate as well. Like it was just, again, if you want to listen to it, definitely check out Cam's podcast. Check out that episode. We won't, harp on the specifics too much, but he basically bashed Ben Roethlisberger as much as anyone could bash Ben Roethlisberger. It was definitely eye-opening, I would say.
I think that this might be a little controversial. I don't know that Joey Porter really said anything that we didn't kind of already know.
Yes. Now that's the thing.
I will say with this caveat, it's not like Porter played there all 20 years that Ben was in Pittsburgh.
He's talking about young Ben at this point.
Right. Young Ben had a reputation, and young Ben is the same Ben that we still, as Steelers fans, kind of have to begrudgingly defend, because as Joey said, there's stuff that Ben did that we kind of let wash under because he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, and it never feels good, but it is reality, right?
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that Ben also still, well after Joey Porter was done playing football, was actually on the coaching staff while Ben Roethlisberger was quarterback. Roethlisberger didn't exactly help or I don't want to say allow, because that sounds a little bit too presumptuous, but like he didn't make it easy on the Steelers to transition from him, because Mason Rudolph, who chimed in on Instagram in the comment section in full agreement.
Yeah.
He didn't get any extra help. Kenny Pickett didn't get any extra help. Not that I think Kenny would have panned out, not that I think Mason would have panned out, but Ben didn't want to see the team be successful after him at the quarterback position at his expense. And that's a reality that Steelers fans are aware of. I don't think Joey said too much that we weren't aware of. I will agree with what Doran Dickerson said on the radio this morning in response, and that is really and truly he put Cam Hayward in a bad position because Cam is in that same podcast space as Ben. If you're gonna go off on this, do it on James's podcast where they're already ripping the Steelers. Go on Kay Adams' show. Do something else. Say it somewhere else, and I think it comes off a little bit better. But I don't think Joey said anything that we didn't already kind of know, especially from the context of the early years of Ben's career.
No, I agree. I don't think what he said is that no one's jaw should be on the floor about what was said about Ben. It's the fact that it was Joey Porter doing it on Cam's podcast is why it's kind of like, oh boy, because obviously Cam's still on the team currently. I know there's been some thoughts that he put out a tweet that was kind of cryptic a little bit. Yeah, the closing of the book. Who knows what that means, if it means anything, or if Cam's just trolling us, because I could see him doing that. But the point is he is an active member of the team currently. Putting him in a bad position, I think, is very fair to say, given what was said. But at the same time, with Ben obviously not being on the team for quite some time now, I don't know how much it ultimately matters for Cam. I do think that he kind of can say what he wants to say at this point, and if fans don't like it, he's never really cared about that. Let's be honest about it. But it is an interesting thing for Joey to say on that particular show, like you said, and not somewhere else.
Agreed.
For sure. But look, before we get moving to our next topic, and really our biggest topic, I think, because this has been dominating on No Steel Curtains headlines specifically, and really every Steelers news, this is kind of the big thing that people are talking about, and it's something that I was hoping we wouldn't have to talk about, Jacob. I was really hoping we weren't going to have to talk about it, but we will today, and we've already talked about it a little bit on the show. But before we jump into that, you're tuned into the Steel Curtain podcast, where Steelers fans come to talk, celebrate, and debate. For more coverage, hit up steelcurtain.com, powered by the passion of fans at Fansided. But now, let's talk about it. Aaron Rodgers redo. Steelers want the former MVP back in 2026. By all accounts, that is what we're hearing. And we're going to talk about it because, unfortunately, we have to. And it seems more and more like this is going to be the case. I'm still holding out some hope, and we're going to talk about it in the section that it might not be the case. But until we see otherwise, we kind of have to assume that that's the plan until it isn't, essentially, right? And let's just start off with it. Do we buy that this is what they want? Because to me, it's felt pretty clear with the way the season ended and just how everything played out that this was not going to be the direction they go again in 2026, whether it's because they don't want to, whether it's because Rodgers doesn't want to, or preferably both. But it seems now that the Steelers are all in on it. It's just them waiting on Rodgers. Do you really think that's the case, Jacob?
I don't think it's the sole reason they hired Mike McCarthy, but I think they hired Mike McCarthy in some capacity with the hope that maybe that would help Rodgers come back, because you look at the rest of the free agent class, you look at the quarterback class in the draft, and you're like, well, what else are we going to do? Run it with Will Howard and Mason Rudolph? Please, Rodgers, come back. Look, I mean, I think they would welcome Rodgers back into the building. I think they have contingency plans, of course, if Rodgers decides not to play.
Unlike last year, where it was basically Mason Rudolph for nothing. Yeah, that was tough.
But I do hope that if this is what they want, that we get an answer a lot sooner than we got one last year.
That's the key thing for me, is I do buy that that's what they want. Everyone is telling us this. I don't think there's any reason in anything the Steelers have said, which, again, Mike McCarthy said he's talked to him. He said he would love to have him back, basically. Art Rooney II said the same thing. There's no reason to think that's not the case. But the idea of him coming back after last year still kind of just feels impossible to me, but I digress. I get that might be what they think is the best situation. But I do think the interesting thing about this is, what is the deadline for them? When do they need to know if he's going to be the quarterback? Because to me, it needs to be prior to the start of free agency. Because even if the free agent class is very thin and there's really no one that really surprised or is going to be someone that they think can be a starter for them long term, except for maybe Malik Willis, who's going to have a serious market that they might not want to get into, they need to know so they at least can grab someone to compete, because they're probably not going to be able to do in the draft unless our later topic we're going to talk about does come true, and the guy that's most commonly mocked to them right now is who they pick in the draft. They're probably not going to get someone that's really going to compete for a starting job in 2026 in the draft. So I do think if the deadline is set before free agency, fine. Like, he has to make the decision if it's going to be him, whatever. But if it drags past that, I'm going to start getting not just more irritated than I already would be for him coming back, but especially so if he's dragging out past that.
I think the aspect of that to define is honestly for Steelers fans. It's not for the front office, because I think last year the front office seemed to operate as if they knew.
They knew
Rodgers was going to be the quarterback, before it was announced. But Steelers fans were working with the assumption of, we have no idea who the quarterback is going to be. Now Rodgers has been here. Now he's the quarterback. Even if you're not really under contract yet, at least do Steelers fans a solid, because I think for the most part, Steelers fans were relatively okay with what he provided last year. It just obviously was limited, and he wasn't. We got to see MVP Rodgers 3 or 4 times, but otherwise he was at least somebody who was keeping the team afloat. So you owe it to us now, I think, as fans to players, give us some sort of assurance in what you're planning on doing when other, the other 31 teams fan bases have that assurance already.
Exactly. Like, we just need to know what is going on with this position, because for me, even if it is Rodgers coming back, which I have a lot of issues with, and we'll get to that in a second, at least if we know that that's the plan, the rest of the offseason operates a certain way, where we know what the goal really is, because there's no reason for him to come back unless they are serious about trying to compete again in 2026. And I think that is their plan no matter what happens with Rodgers, but especially if he comes back. It does, in my opinion, change how you operate this offseason to some degree. So it is going to be interesting to see how soon we get an answer on this. Again, I would like it before free agency officially kicks off, just so we can go into that with a plan in place with him at quarterback. But I won't be shocked if that's not when we get the answer. That's all I'm going to say. So that's kind of the big thing. Sure. But moving past just, whether they want to do this or not and when it might happen, and this, I'll start with you here on this one, Jacob. Is the Rodgers-McCarthy pairing the best option they could have for 2026? Do you think that that's the highest chance of them competing based on what we know about the quarterback situation in free agency and the draft?
Well, it's frustrating to say yes.
Yeah,
because there's no other way to compete for a championship, which is still what the team is selling this fan base. I get it from one standpoint. You don't want to rebuild. I get it. You want to stay competitive, but and I'm not, one of these people that thinks that you need to be bad so that you can draft somebody in the top 10 because that's going to magically solve everything, because it's not. Yeah. But you do have to kind of take a step back and realize, okay, if you're going to go about it this way, you still have to plan for the future.
Yes.
Is the pairing the best option for 2026? Yeah, because there's not many other options. But just because that's your plan for 2026 doesn't mean don't plan for 2027 and beyond.
Yeah.
Find somebody that you can develop behind Rodgers who isn't a 6th-round pick. I like Will Howard, but we can't be serious talking about a 6th-round pick who was thrown to Jeremiah Smith to win a national championship as the starting quarterback 2 or 3 years after he was a 6th-round pick. If he goes full Brock Purdy with the whole situation, fine, whatever, it's cool. Let's do that. But you can't actually plan to make Tom Brady happen in an Ohio State genre. It's not how it works. So let that happen naturally. Is it the best idea for 2026? Yes. Just don't sell out for 2026 against everything else beyond that.
See, that's the issue for me, is this is the best probably pairing as far as the floor and definitely probably not the ceiling, because I do think there's one guy that I want to talk about for ceiling. But in terms of knowing what you're getting, knowing what you're going to be able to expect every week from this pairing, I do think it's probably their best bet to compete in 2026. The problem is 2026, in my opinion, and again, this is specifically me, and I feel like Tommy would say the same as well. So again, I can speak for him a little bit. 2026, there is nothing they can do to compete for a Super Bowl in 2026. There is no offseason plan that exists that would get them into contention for the Super Bowl. So to me, I do not care about 2026. I do not care about maximizing 2026, because if they do that, if they go with Rodgers and they maximize this year again, if they sign the 31-year-old receiver in the middle of the season, if they do all the stuff that the Steelers do, right? If they do all those things, it will amount to the same season that we've seen for a decade, and nothing will be done to further their chances of competing in 2027 and beyond. So yes, the answer to this question, I would say, is yes. The problem is they're trying to do something that they have no business trying to do. And that is the issue with it ultimately, right? So that's kind of my stance on it. Again, we've talked about this plenty on this podcast. That's our stance on this team as a whole, is that they continue to do the same thing, expecting a different result. And that is obviously the definition of what, Jacob? Insanity. Boom. See, and that's the problem, right? It's not even Rodgers' fault. Like, he didn't play terrible last year overall. He played the most boring brand of football you can play, and it hurt my eyes 90% of the time. But every so often, he'd whip it down the field like, hey, he can still do that. Oh, but he can only do it like twice a game is the problem. So it's, if they can get more out of him, sure. And the offense should be better around him because it's not being coordinated by someone who had to go to college to keep coordinating offenses. So that's cool. But at the same time, like, I don't know how much better it can really be when you operate at quarterback the way that he operates at 43 years old. So
yeah, to me, if I do think there is some way to be championship material. Okay. I do hold out some level of hope for that, but it's not necessarily from the cope of buying what the franchise is selling. It's because you've got a Hall of Fame quarterback, you've got a Hall of Fame caliber type head coach, you've got Hall of Famers on the defense, and you've got pieces. You just have to add the right pieces around that. Right. And that's where my confidence in 2026 is similar to yours, in that they haven't shown that they can make those type of moves. They can make drastic moves, but it's at the expense of other moves, like DK Metcalf instead of George Pickens. That's a net neutral move, those type of things.
Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of, so this is the last part of this conversation before we move on to our other topics today. Who would we rather see brought in for the job, if anyone? And I do have two names on my list here, but I want to start with you, Jacob, see if we line up on this. Is there any names that you would want to see brought in ahead of Aaron Rodgers, whether it's because you think that there's a chance that it could be better, even if it isn't guaranteed, or it just would better fit kind of what you want this team to be doing and how you want them to operate in 2026?
See, this is where beggars can't be choosers.
Yes. Yeah. But I do have two names, but yeah, go ahead.
I don't have a name.
Okay.
And it is not... I'm an Alabama guy, so like, shouldn't I be all about Tua and Mac Jones and Ty Simpson? And the answer is no.
We'll get to Ty Simpson in a minute,
right? I like Ty Simpson, and I've got
good things to say about him
when we talk about him. But I look around like, why should I feel confident that Daniel Jones is going to continue what he did in Indianapolis? Why? Kyler Murray? No. No. I don't. I think for me, the only real option they've got at this point, because of the way things have gone up until this point, I would have changed things a long time ago because I would have hired Mike McCarthy, but I'm not in charge, right?
Right, exactly. We're playing with what we have to work with. Right?
Exactly. Playing with what we have. Aaron Rodgers, draft a quarterback that you think you can develop, whether he's first round or later. Nobody's going to be happy if it's Garrett Nussmeier, but I don't think anybody's going to be surprised if it's Garrett Nussmeier.
Oh, it's probably going to be Garrett Nussmeier.
Like in round two. So, I'm okay with Rodgers in 2026, as long as there's contingency plans beyond that aren't spent in the 6th round. Will Howard can compete down the road. Cool, whatever. Sure, just give competition for the position in the future.
All right, fair enough. So I get that, especially like the names that you brought up, like Daniel Jones, just simply not touching him with an Achilles and being not in the Colts offense, because he should just go back to the Colts and be happy. That's what he should do.
100%.
So hopefully that works out for him. Kyler Murray, I really like some parts of Kyler Murray's game, but at the end of the day, he just has gotten progressively less effective over the past 3 years. And until he proves otherwise, I'm not going to be the team that takes the chance on him, especially if I have to trade for him. Now, if he gets cut and you can bring him in for cheap, who cares? Like, that's a talented player that just might need to change the scenery. It might be one of those deals where we've seen that enough. Sam Darnold just won this freaking Super Bowl. I'm not going to say anything is impossible at this point. So, maybe Kyler Murray will be the next guy to do that. Whatever. But the point is I'm not going to be banking on that, and I'm also not going to be giving up any assets to do that. So that's a different conversation. The two names, and there's one of the names I cannot believe I'm saying, and the other one I can now that I've seen him play a little bit in a different situation. I do think that it's not impossible that if he's healthy, that the Steelers would actually have a higher ceiling in 2026 with Derek Carr of all people at quarterback. And I know that sounds insane. And
That's where we're at.
And it hurts me to say this, but the fact that he is maybe interested in coming out of retirement, he's apparently his shoulder's healthy. The last time we saw him play football for the Saints, now it was with Clint Kubiak, offense coordinator, who has done an insane job with the Seahawks now and is about to be the Raiders head coach. So like different level, even though Mike McCarthy's had a ton of offensive success, probably not as innovative or as creative as Kubiak is. But we saw Carr play legitimately good football the last time he played. He just obviously got hurt, right? And obviously those first two games of 2024 were ridiculous. Not expecting that to be the case with Derek Carr ever again. But I think, like, realistically, he's going to be less limited than Aaron Rodgers if he's healthy. That's for sure. Is he going to be as smart and able to do some of the things that Rodgers does to kind of elevate things? No. But he's at least going to be able to actually, like, potentially not die the second anyone gets close to him, which is what Aaron Rodgers' biggest problem is right now. So now, am I willing to say that he would definitely be better than Aaron Rodgers? No, because I haven't seen Derek Carr play in a while, and he was banged up when he retired. Like, that's just not great. But he's almost a decade younger. Like, you have to understand. Like, he's in his mid-30s. He's still almost a decade younger. This is what we're talking about at quarterback for the Steelers. We're not in the situation to really be, again, beggars can't be choosers. So I think that's at least something interesting to look into. Not advocating for it, but the big one, and unfortunately, I think they're going to get priced out of this market, and maybe just weren't going to be interested at all. Malik Willis has been so good the last couple times he's played football in the NFL, and I know it's a small sample size, but at the end of the day, and this is something that I've learned from watching prospects, especially, there's certain traits that Willis has displayed well with the Packers that I think go beyond the scheme that he's playing in. And it's not simply just, oh, well, Matt LaFleur is a great play caller and he's setting him up for success and all that stuff. He has shown like legitimate progression as a pocket passer, as someone who can manipulate the pocket. He still has his wheels. That hasn't gone anywhere. He can still run with the best of them. But now he's playing quarterback in the way the NFL quarterbacks who are mobile like he is have to play to be actually successful. And that's the thing that has separated someone like him from Justin Fields, in my opinion, where Fields did do some stuff for the Steelers that showed some progress in that regard. Now, then he goes to the Jets, and it basically completely dies, which, no offense to the Jets, but that was going to happen because it's the Jets. Like, I don't even know how much of that was Fields getting that much worse. I think they just had no idea how to actually play offense. Yep. But besides the point, Willis just showed a lot of the things that people were hoping Justin Fields would finally learn to do. And again, it's like 3 games roughly of playing time with the Packers, but they were 3 really good games, like about as good as we've seen over the past 2 years. Good games. Like, that's kind of my thing with it.
I like Malik Willis. If the Aaron Rodgers thing doesn't happen,
yes, that should be their number one target if he doesn't come back. Whether it's because he doesn't want to or they don't do it.
Yeah, it's probably completely off the table otherwise. But I think there's still trepidation because
for sure.
There wasn't that long ago that the Seahawks took Matt Flynn and gave him a pretty fat contract and then didn't start him because he looked good in the Packers uniform. But I mean, Malik Willis was also one of the quarterbacks that we were considering, as fans for the Steelers in the Kenny Pickett draft. And obviously, I mean, as bad as Pickett looked, Willis looked even worse.
With the Titans, he was not a quarterback for the Titans. He was a sacrificial lamb for the Titans when they.
But at the same time, that was a bad situation. Both those quarterbacks ended up in really bad situations. Yeah. Pickett hasn't gone to a good situation since.
Except for the Eagles, but he just
from a development standpoint,
he didn't play though.
So. Yeah, he's still. You're not getting developed as a quarterback in Philadelphia. You're Jalen Hurts or you're somebody else.
Pretty much.
But as who was the first quarterback you named?
Derek Carr.
Derek Carr.
Oh God.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I mean that was more just like Nate. For me, that's the one I'm like, if we're already going veterans, like at least he's not 43 and 34 instead.
My thing with Carr isn't even his injury history, because I agree, like Rodgers under pressure last year was like an old man with getting swarmed by toddlers. Like he just can't hang anymore. But in those situations, instead of getting injured or cracking, Carr just makes bad throws in those situations. He makes bad decisions at the worst possible time, and not in the way that Ben Roethlisberger used to, where it was, he could maybe still come back from it or do something else crazy to make you feel better about it. I've never been particularly impressed with Derek Carr as a quarterback. I don't think he's a winner. And I think he just makes bad decisions at the worst time. And I don't want to sign up to see that in the black and gold.
Yeah, I get that, because like at the end of the day, like, would he be more aggressive overall than Rodgers is because he's not as afraid to die the second the pass rush gets there? Yes.
Yeah.
The problem is with that, he makes more mistakes than you want him to because of that. So there's a balance. Like, I do want them to get more aggressive on offense, but with a balance to it, not just like, let's just do it because. Like, that's when you get in trouble. So I do get that one. But I wanted to throw his name out. I did write an article about that because, and you can check it on stillcurtain.com, because I was like, there's no way he's coming back. I just assumed he was done. It's like, no, apparently if the right team, which that's the key thing. He says the right team. Now, because a lot of people are like, well, the Jets need a quarterback. It's like, if you're Derek Carr, why in the world would you trade in doing whatever you're doing right now for going to play for the Jets?
The Jets would get some practice at catching interceptions.
This is true. They really need it too. Goodness gracious. But no, yeah, you're right. That one's definitely pushing it. But I was like, hey, at least he's not 43 years old. But again, I expect Rodgers at the end of this conversation to finish it up. I do expect Rodgers to be the quarterback in 2026 until told otherwise.
Yep.
But we will have to see, and hopefully we know sooner rather than later, as we already discussed. But before we jump into our next section here, definitely, obviously, support the podcast. But if you are a fan of Pittsburgh Steelers football and would like to support the Still Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Still Curtain podcast on YouTube, and be sure to follow our written work at stillcurtain.com. We appreciate your support. Definitely comment, like, all that good stuff. If you're on YouTube, just do the thing, please. It helps. It really does. So, and if you like us, we will be bringing content usually twice a week throughout the offseason, if not at least once a week. So definitely check us out here. But let's jump into our next part. This will be a little bit fun, I think, because we're finally getting firmly into draft season, because the Super Bowl is now past us. The season is officially fully over. I've already been fully into draft season pretty much since the Steelers season ended, because I didn't want to have to think about it, frankly, and now here we are still. But right now, and I use NFL Mock Draft Database to pull this information, I wanted to talk about the 5 picks and 5 players in particular who are being most commonly mocked to the Steelers to pick 21. And I personally rank them, and I want to kind of get your thoughts, Jacob, on where you're at with this pick and where you're at with the consensus here. So, but let's start with this one here. Number 5 for me, and who actually is the most commonly mocked player currently, and again, we're going to talk about him. You already mentioned his name earlier, Ty Simpson, quarterback out of Alabama. And he's at 5 simply, before I get your thoughts on it, Jacob, simply because I don't think the Steelers should be drafting a quarterback in the first round this year, no matter who it is. Because the only one I would personally, if I was in a position like the Steelers, is the guy going at number 1. So if I can't have him, can't have Fernando Mendoza, I'm not taking a guy in round 1 when I think that just the talent and the fit doesn't line up.
I love Ty Simpson for, obvious reasons.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is that ever since he was coming out of high school, I've always gotten a Zach Wilson vibe out of him. And that's one of those, he's got some tools. Does he use them properly? Early in the season, he used those tools properly. Late in the season, he really kind of didn't.
Yeah.
But there were plenty of times throughout the 2025 season where he looked like the best quarterback in college football.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just when Alabama was playing, the cupcakes that you guys think we play every week. It's he looked fantastic. Alabama's offense has its own issues in play calling and scheme and structure and all those different types of things. And the transition from Milroe to Simpson not being the same kind of quarterbacks. Simpson's backup quarterbacks is not the same kind of quarterbacks as he is.
Yeah.
But the factor for me is I'm okay with taking him at 21 if Rodgers is a starting quarterback, because at least it shows that we've got some future focus here.
Yeah.
Because it's a deep wide receiver class, it's a deep corner class, it's a deep everything else class. In terms of some of the things that Steelers need.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm not too bent out of shape if Simpson is the pick at 21. But like, you shouldn't be moving up for him. You know, you shouldn't really be settling for him either, too. So it feels weird. Like if you're picking a quarterback in the first round, why are you waiting until 21 to take him? Go up and get the guy if you love him that much. Simpson could develop here in Pittsburgh, I think, but I'm not sold on the idea that it'll happen. And I don't think the majority of Steelers Nation will be too pleased if that were the case.
Yeah, and I think the problem ultimately for me is that I think Simpson's a better prospect than Kenny Pickett, but it would feel a lot like that situation.
Exactly.
Right? Where you're taking quarterback, in the 20s. And we did just see, even though I'm still very much far from being sold on it, Jackson Dart did have some success as a rookie, being picked 25th for the Giants. He is a very toolsy guy that helps him. Tyler Shuck, picked in the 40s, was very good for the Saints. So picked 40 specifically. So it's not that quarterbacks can't be good that are drafted in that range. It's just the odds of it are very, very low. And it's already a position that's very hard to get right, even if you're picking in the top 5. It does not help when you're picking them in the 20s. Like you're banking on something that just doesn't happen very often. And I think with Simpson, he's a player that I like, but I do think there are flaws to his game that are just kind of scary. He is a slider player. He's a guy that really craters under pressure a lot of the time right now. And he is a player that hasn't played a lot in college, so that might get better as he develops, but just didn't get a lot of reps in college to kind of get better at that. I did love the way he attacked the middle of the field. I think that's one of the things he did better than almost anyone in the college level last year. Watching him, he's my number 2 quarterback in this class. Not that that means anything, because it's pretty hard not to be the number 2 quarterback if you can breathe. But especially with Chambliss, probably not. His situation is another conversation.
And even then, he's 5'11", right?
Exactly. So it's like, whatever. But like being QB2, he's probably going to be somewhere in my top 50 prospects. It's going to be hit or miss with that. But like, I agree with you. The fact that you'd be taking a guy in the 20s whenever next year, theoretically, if you are picking the 20s, there's probably a more overall talented prospect sitting there for you than it will be this year if you're taking quarterback. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me to do that. So.
Might have said that last bit last year too.
That's the problem. We don't know. But like
Nussmeier and the Penn State kid, Aller, like
and all those guys.
All those guys are supposed to be first rounders, and they're not
supposed to be. But yeah, I have a little bit more faith in next year's class, but it's still like it just mostly because so many guys didn't come out this year, right? Like it kind of like as long as enough of them don't do the same thing that the other guys did and either get hurt or just be bad, probably going to be all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. But number 4 here for me, and I don't have a specific player, insert corner here, because there's a lot of guys who are like not in the top 4 most commonly mocked, but a lot of the guys that are mocked outside of that group are corners. And it does make some sense because Joey Porter Jr. obviously really had a great season. He should be kind of the number 1 corner for this team moving forward, as he has been. But outside of that, a lot of questions. James Pierre had a really awesome season, but can we assume that's going to happen again in a different defense? And as he's 30 years old, I think he will be, if he's not already, if I'm not mistaken. The whole situation with Jalen Ramsey, what position does he play next year? I don't know. I assume safety, but could he go back to slot corner? Like, there's just a lot of questions with that room, right? So to me, it makes sense to target a corner here if it's the best player on the board, but I just don't personally think that whoever that will be is going to be the best player on the board. So I have it at 4 for that reason.
I agree with that. I re-ranked these in my own opinion. Okay. I put corner at the bottom.
And I get that. Yeah, I get that too.
To me, it's just not that huge of a need because Porter's an elite corner on one side of the field. Eccles was fantastic in the slot most of the time.
Most of the time.
James Pierre, I don't know where James Pierre came from last year, but more of that, and we're all about it. Yeah, absolutely good for him. And if I'm the Steelers, I keep Ramsey at safety.
Yeah,
and to me, like, I know that doesn't sound like the best situation, but like, we are talking about the highest paid defense. Yeah. We're talking about that defense getting a coordinator who was known to do more with less, and now he's got more, so he should do more with more, right?
You assume so.
That's what I'm hoping. So I think that's a solid enough thing to make sure that we're focusing on the real issue of this team. Like, the defense wasn't good last year. Don't get me wrong.
No,
but Mike Tomlin's not here anymore. So we'll have a new version of whatever it is with
there's at least hope that can be different. Yeah.
Right. You would expect that with a new voice and a new scheme and a scheme that is, supposedly does more with less, right? All of those things, the offense can't score points. The offense can't reliably move the ball. The offense constantly goes 3 and out. And like, all of these are persistent issues from before the Matt Canada era. Like, these are ingrained issues that have pervaded throughout the years. You need to get guys who can fix that. And a cornerback in the first round of this draft, as deep as this class is, when you can get one in the second or third round when you want to, why are we not taking offensive players in the first round?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's really the ultimate thing.
Yeah.
And honestly, the reason I had Simpson at 5 is more so just because I do think that if they do that, it will probably not work out given the situation that he would be going into. So I'd rather not take a swing on a quarterback and have it fail, even more so than taking a corner when I don't think you necessarily have to. Exactly. But I understand why you'd have him have that position at 5, though, because it just isn't as big of a need as the next positions we're going to talk about. And we're going to get into it because all the next 3, all one position, and it's the position that is glaringly bad, frankly, even with DK Metcalf factored in. Just not good. That is obviously wide receiver. First name on the list for me, Denzel Boston, the wide receiver out of Washington. And he's 3 out of this group because he is just the lowest ranked for me personally out of these 3 that are being mocked most commonly. And because I do think that his skill set, even though it does fit, because he could be the true X and allow DK to not have to do a lot of that stuff, which he, frankly, despite his size, is not as good at as you would imagine he would. He would be able to be that true X receiver that can be a downfield threat, that can be a possession player for you, can sky over defenders and actually win the ball, opposed to DK, who just, again, despite his size, not good at that, weirdly. He would be a really good fit next to him, but I do think he's just not as good of a player as the next 2 guys I have up.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with the aspect that he's just not quite as good as the other 2, but I think also at the same time, like, this is a guy that's probably going to be sitting in that spot almost assuredly, whereas the other 2 might end up going a little bit earlier, depending on how the combine goes, especially one of them in my mind. But I mean, Boston is a player that I would be certainly happy with at 21. Just a competent receiver from a successful offense who, I would like a little bit more versatility opposite of DK Metcalf. I would like something, more so what you would expect out of what Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin should have given the offense last year with the speed and the route running ability and all that other sort of stuff, so that Metcalf's plate isn't so full with doing those things so that he can do the things that he's more prototypically suited for, that he has been better at in the past and has just kind of trailed off in recent years. But I mean, I would definitely be happy with Boston in that spot.
Yeah, he's a good player. I do have a first round grade on him, a late first round grade, but again, we're talking pick 21, whatever. We need a receiver. He plays a valuable role in a receiver room that we don't currently have on the team. I would have no problem with it. And the number 2, I have this player number 2 for 2 key reasons, ironically. One, because I just have a feeling if they want him, they're going to have to trade up, which I don't know if they're going to do necessarily. And also because, for me personally, he is my 3rd wide receiver for a specific reason that I'll get into. Mekhi Lemon, the wide receiver out of USC. And just first, right off the bat, unbelievably fun player. He's so good at what he does. He is a dynamic slot option. A lot of people are comparing him to some really lofty names, Amon-Ra St. Brown, JSN, what he just did this year. I think that's a little too lofty for him, but he's in that mold of player where he is just a ball winner despite his frame and his size. He's not necessarily the most explosive player in terms of speed, but he just gets open, tough as hell, unbelievable, just football player overall. So it's really hard not to love Mekhi Lemon.
Yeah, for all those reasons that you said, that's why I put him at 1
and again,
above the next guy, because he's the best in that regard. But yeah, you'd probably have to move up to get him. But like that's the kind of thing that, like I just said, that's what I'm looking for in the offense, is somebody who is more voluminous and more underneath, but can also stretch and make big plays down the field as well. And that's what it appears Lemon brings to whoever is lucky enough to draft him.
Yeah, the ball winning from him for his size is just incredible to watch. Like, he just skies above guys despite being a smaller player for the position. Like, he could offer you verticality in a different way than like a DK Metcalf offers you verticality, which I think is important for this offense.
Yeah.
So, and also we know how much Mike McCarthy loves to target the slot receivers. That's why CeeDee Lamb was in the slot so much. Do I think that him and CeeDee Lamb are similar at all? Not really, but they're both slot players who could handle a lot of targets. So in that way, you definitely use them similarly. And then my number one option here, and it's because I do have this player currently, and I will say, like, I'm going to be watching receivers again here soon because I want to watch a lot more guys that I didn't get to in my first watch through. But he currently sits at my number 2 spot in my receiver rankings, Casey Concepcion from Texas A&M. This guy, to me, and the comp I have on him is part of why I really like him a lot, and one of the reasons I want him to be on the Steelers if we can do it. I think that he could be Emmanuel Sanders, but like the version of Emmanuel Sanders that we didn't get to see on the Steelers because we let him go, which – one of the few times that it's not worked out for us. And then you could also argue George Pickens so far, but we'll see how his career pans out from here. But one of the few times a receiver leaves the Steelers and actually gets better, I think he's a pretty similar player to him. Smaller overall frame-wise, but just explosive athlete, great route runner. The hands are a little questionable, and that's part of why I think some people are a little bit lower on him. I get that. But he does show some serious ball-winning ability, too, for his size on tape at times. So I'm very interested in him. Yeah.
Sorry, I think the takeaway we're getting over at the Bills site is that Concepcion would be great in Joe Brady's offense because of the screen aspect, because this dude can make plays with the ball in his hands in space. I think that's the aspect that excites me. I think what the things that he can kind of do in the slot underneath, make guys miss in space. I think those are the kind of things that are attractive to me. I still like Lemon more.
I get that because they're very different players too. Like,
yeah,
they're not at all the same, really.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't think, if I'm a Steelers fan and Casey Concepcion is the pick at 21, my feelings about Texas A&M aside, I'm excited because that dude can ball.
Yeah, I think he can play in the slot. I think he can be outside as a Z. Like, he can move around, do a lot of things. He gives explosiveness. What would we need to find someone who can be more prototypical X? Sure, but you could find guys who fit that profile as more like, in my opinion, what I like to call, and I think Matt Harmon coined this term actually from Reception Perception, sacrificial X. We would need one of those guys, but you can find some guys like that in this draft and probably in free agency to kind of fill that role, to let Metcalf and in this case Concepcion do that, for you. So that would definitely be my choice to 21 right now if we're doing mocks, which I have done a few at this point. But I do think that we'll kind of see how this plays out moving forward, see how far Lemon moves up. Maybe Concepcion continues to move up at the combine. If he runs in the 4.3s, which I think he could, that will change, I think, his profile for some people. So,
oh yeah.
But let's get into our next section here. But before we do, if you, from the highs and the heartbreaks in every headline, this is the Still Curtain Podcast, your source for NFL talk, powered by StillCurtain.com and the fan voices at Fansided. Again, check out StillCurtain.com. That is what powers this podcast. Tom and I are doing stuff all the time. Jacob still writes a ton for us, even with being the site expert for the Bills. So definitely check all of our stuff out there.
I try to.
Yeah, you do plenty, trust me. No worries there. But let's get into our last topic here, and we're just going to talk a little bit about the biggest game in the world, obviously, that was played this past week, Super Bowl 60 fallout. What lessons can the Steelers learn from these teams, in particular the Seahawks, as they did win, especially because the Patriots are in a different position the Steelers find themselves, where they got to be really bad and get a quarterback. Steelers are probably not going to be in that boat, definitely not this year, and maybe not ever the way that they are. So probably focusing mostly on the Seahawks here. But my first question for you, Jacob, does the Seahawks win prove defense still wins championships?
Oh yeah. I don't remember the last time we had a Super Bowl champion that made me question that.
Fair enough.
The Seahawks defense is one of the best I've ever seen
in a long time.
Ever. 4-man pressures. Do you know how beautiful that? Like, I love blitzes.
Great.
Don't get me wrong. Pittsburgh
yeah,
Steelers
look at Devin Witherspoon.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, look at Devin Witherspoon in this game too. He blitz all the time.
Yeah, but like even still, it's a lot of 4-man pressures with the blitzes and stunts that they chalk up. You had I get it. The Patriots' offensive line is not great, but I was over at 12th Man Rising early in the season. Like the consistency with which that defense could pressure a quarterback more than they had ever been pressured in their entire careers before is ridiculous. Like they have it figured out against modern offenses. They shut down Kyle Shanahan twice.
Yep.
They get it, man. But here's the thing: it's not about paying a bunch of superstars top dollar to make it happen, because I guarantee you, a whole bunch of people didn't know the first name off of that defense when the season started, even if you knew who Leonard Williams was. He's probably the biggest name on that defense, and yet, I think a lot of people were introduced to people like Ernest Jones and Nick Emenwari, and to a lesser extent, guys like Josh Jobe. But you mentioned Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen. Like, these aren't household names, even if they were relatively high drafted.
Especially Witherspoon. Yeah, he was the one that you could maybe argue, but otherwise, no.
Yeah. No, they did it with a young defensive-minded head coach. Crazy how that works.
Yeah. And, once upon a time, Steelers were in that boat too. Now, granted, that team was very well put together already, and we can have an argument about that if we wanted to. We're not going to on this show. But the point is like, this is something that can still absolutely work. Now, would I say that the highest upside play in the NFL is to find yourself, especially for long-term success and being able to compete, is to find an offensive play caller that can be your head coach, because it's just much harder to find guys to stick around and to build your offense? Yes. But defenses still obviously have a huge part, especially in the playoffs, more so than even the regular season, in whether you can make it to a Super Bowl, because you're going to play a lot of great offenses in the playoffs. And your offense, whether it's great or not, is not guaranteed to be able to outscore them every time if you have a defense that can't do it. Look at the Bills. As well as anyone, now that you're covering them, what has their biggest problem been for the most part? Now, I know this year Josh had 5 turnovers.
The one time.
Yeah, right, the one time. But normally he's putting up 30 points, turning the ball over 0 times, and he's not winning the Super Bowl ever because his defense gives up the amount of points they need to lose.
He did put up 30 points against the Broncos.
He still did, yeah, still did.
Just saying.
It's a whole thing. But the point is that doesn't always work, right? No matter how good your quarterback is and how good your offense is, you still need the defense to play its part, if not be kind of the biggest factor, right? Which it was for both of these teams going into this, really, especially the Patriots. You could argue, really, at least in terms of the playoff run. So I think the answer to this is certainly yes. I think the thing I will say is, your defense doesn't necessarily need to be the Seahawks defense, but it has to be one that can actually consistently compete with an offense and be able to counter some of the things that they do, which unfortunately the Patriots could do nothing on offense to do, to even remotely contend with the Seahawks defense. There's no point in that game where it felt even like it was close between those two units. It was such a mismatch from the beginning. So I do think this does prove that you can be a defensive-minded team, especially, and still win the Super Bowl and go far, as long as the offense plays its part. And it's the same kind. You could argue back and forth either way, offense, defense, but the other side still has to play its part. It doesn't have to necessarily be dominant on both sides of the ball, but you have to be able to do things well on both sides. But one of the things that I definitely want to finish with, and this is kind of the most important conversation about this, how can Pittsburgh emulate what Seattle has done to rise to the top of the NFL? Because there is some key tenets of what they've done that I think really any team should be looking to do because of the way they've built this. But I do think there's some specific things that they've done, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on it too before I jump into mine, on how we can try to emulate some of the things that they've done to get to where they're at.
Take notes on how John Schneider drafts.
Yes, that's the number one thing.
I mean, they have not had a bad draft in years. They've made some questionable picks like Jalen Milroe last year, but since they drafted, I think, Charles Cross in 2021 or 2, they haven't really missed in the first round.
Not with the important picks, yeah.
No, not at all. And I mean, when you start listing off guys like Witherspoon, Emenwari, guys that got passed over by teams that you expected to take them, because Witherspoon, I think, was pegged to go a little bit earlier to the Lions, and they went with Jahmyr Gibbs. That obviously worked out for them, but that was still a bit of a surprise at that time. They don't miss in the draft, and that's something that the Steelers have struggled with in recent years, dating back to before Kenny Pickett. It's not a recent development, and they've hit on some players, but I mean, you got to hit with the frequency that they're hitting with to replicate, emulate what Seattle did, because it's impressive. Yeah,
and Snyder, to his credit, he was really going through a rough period after their Super Bowl runs, as a drafter and as a GM in general. he did have to refocus and kind of reevaluate what he was doing. And you saw that not only with the success that they've had in recent years, but like this past year's draft. I never believed that Gray Zabel was going to go to the Seahawks because he just refused to draft interior offensive linemen early for his entire career with the Seahawks. And it was such a thing that I just assumed was going to continue because it would be a breaker of tendencies if he did it. But he did it because he knew, I just signed Sam Darnold. I can't have the interior be completely useless. It's impossible. And so he went out, he got his guy, and he played really well this year overall for a rookie, and especially in the playoffs. And now they're probably going to continue to add to that spot. I wouldn't be surprised if they go early with that too.
They still need a right guard.
Oh yeah, Anthony Bradford is yikes.
Oh,
but at the end of the day, like he changed his approach. He changed up what he did, and he was able to find contributors. Second round too. Like, not saying this guy is an insane player, but like Boye Mafe has been a good pick. Derek Hall has been a good pick. He just had a great Super Bowl. Like, these guys as a collective have been able to find roles, and Mike McDonald's been able to use these guys in creative ways to create one of the better defenses in the NFL. And right now, probably until further notice, the best defense in the NFL, realistically. Probably the Texans have a shot to contend with that, but otherwise, I don't know.
Yeah, I think to your point, it's not just that they're hitting on the top stars in the first round, they're also hitting on the depth pieces. Because like Boye Mafe isn't a starter, and he's not going to get like crazy money in free agency this year, but he still had a fantastic season if you don't look at his sack totals.
Yeah,
like if you look at his
pressures,
and
he was better the year before. Like,
yeah,
he's been a productive player for them despite not being like a high profile player. So
it's a lot of guys like that, and also to Schneider's credit, he also moved on from Pete Carroll when it was time.
Yes.
So it's not solely his decision, but you went out and you got Mike McDonald when it was clear Pete Carroll's time had run its course in Seattle, and they were able to flip that switch with the draft. All that working out in their favor.
Absolutely. Like, that's what they've done. And like the decision to, as much as I didn't like it at the time, because I felt like he kind of got the short end of the stick, turns out probably not, unless it was just the Raiders making him as bad as he was, the swap of Geno Smith and Sam Darnold. Like, that's a move that when they did it, I'm like, I think Geno Smith is significantly better quarterback than Sam Darnold. And he had been for the most part, if you look at the numbers and what he did with Seattle. But they clearly saw that either Smith was hitting a wall, which he did have a rough year that year, but a lot of that was due to interior pressure, which they were able to shore up a little bit this year. But like, they clearly saw with Kubiak coming in that Darnold was going to be a better fit for them, and ultimately he was, right? And he was able to win a Super Bowl of all people. It's still funny that he's the first 2018 quarterback drafted to win a Super Bowl. That's certainly not what I would have banked on even a year ago, let alone longer than that ago. So that decision also, you have to praise him for doing that.
Yeah, it's not a lot of people wanted to really even give Sam Darnold that shot. No. Like 14 wins in Minnesota, and it's just like, well, yeah, he had Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison.
It was easy to excuse it away. Yeah,
right.
Really,
sure, he goes to Seattle and he's got JSN and an even better defense, but like he didn't turn the ball over in the postseason. That's one way to win a Super Bowl. Don't turn the ball over.
And he, of all people, who had ended up still even as good a year as he had 15 interceptions in the regular season.
Yeah, he led the NFL in turnovers in the regular season.
It wasn't. I think it might have been. I think Tua had more interceptions. I don't know if maybe fumbles combined. Maybe he had more.
I think it was total turnovers. Sam Darnold led the league.
Might have been, but guess what? He didn't do it in the playoffs. Which of all times you'd think Sam Darnold to do it, that would be win. But he shorted up and he played within himself and got his team a Super Bowl.
But that's kind of what he is. I mean, he led the country in turnovers, I think, at USC.
Oh, he definitely did 1 year. Yeah,
he's a gunslinger. He can be a little bit careless with the ball on his hands in the pocket sometimes, but I mean, he's got something figured out because he knows to target his guys who will, win the catch point, who will make big plays, and he operates within the scope of the offense. He doesn't really expand upon anything too crazy that they're doing. Kubiak just had an incredible scheme and he executed it fantastically. Darnold still gets plenty of I don't know, respect and
credit. Yeah.
Credit. Thank you for what he was able to do. And he's certainly seen in a bigger and better light now, but still, I mean, fantastic coaching, fantastic schemes. and fantastic front office building is what got Seattle a Super Bowl championship. The play of the players is fantastic. Don't get me wrong, they executed it, but this is top down. This is how you win a championship. It is from the leadership of the organization understanding what it takes to win championships and executing a plan. That's why you saw the Colts flip so fast early in the season, and it's why you see teams like the Jets and the Dolphins and the Browns and the Raiders always struggling. And I think it'll be interesting to see now with the Raiders having Tom Brady in that kind of leadership thing, if they start to turn that corner and you see these other franchises still languish. And the Steelers are kind of in the middle between all that, and they've got to figure out which route they actually want to follow and which route they want to take. And that starts with Art Rooney II, who was not going to move on from Tomlin if he didn't have to, and followed that up by hiring Mike McCarthy.
Yeah, we love being in the middle, don't we? Just being in the this bushy middle, I think Tommy coined at one point, he likes to call it, of like, hey, we're around. No one's really scared of us, but we're around. We do stuff. That's the thing, and I think that's the point. And you mentioned this earlier. I don't think that the Steelers necessarily need to be the worst team in the league to all of a sudden get better. I know a lot of people keep saying, like, oh, they just need to tank. It's like, I don't even want them to tank necessarily. I just want them to stop doing everything they can to win 10 games every year. Because that's how you win only 10 games every year. Because you never give yourself breathing room to do anything else. Having the 8th pick in the draft one year is not going to kill you. I promise you, Art. You'll survive. The team will not fold. You will be able to just keep playing football the next year. Yeah. And you might get a really good player, and you might be able to figure out the quarterback position that way or whatever. Or you just can find an actual like high-profile player that you can bring in to change things a little bit and to get yourself going. But more importantly, like you said, the drafting, they just haven't missed for like 4 years in a row. When you don't miss in the draft for 4 years in a row, you get really good fast. Because that's the core of your team then, basically. Like, as long as you're drafting, premium positions, which they have in a lot of cases. Like, for the Steelers, like, they need to hit this year when they have these extra third-round picks. It's not as much as capital as Seattle had to work with because they didn't have the luxury of trading Russell Wilson away for 1 billion picks and then him immediately die in Denver. Like, we don't have the ability to do that, unfortunately. But we do have extra third-round picks this year. We have the picks we already have in the first 3 rounds. Like, this is a chance for them to hit. If they can hit on 4 or 5 picks in a row, they could quickly start to build this up a little bit because they can't keep having the most expensive defense in the league. That has to eventually stop happening. Offense needs to get better. If they could just balance this out a little bit more, maybe they can get out of this kind of like middle ground they're in.
I think all of those picks are something to be worth entertaining moving up for the right kind of playmaker to add to the offense to make a difference.
For sure. Yeah.
But I think also those picks got stacked up when you thought maybe this was going to be a good enough quarterback class to move up for a quarterback. So now it's like, well, do you want to just kind of trade back and keep accumulating so that you have the ammo you need when you need it? Maybe. Or do you go all out and you get what you need right now? And the Steelers have been a go all out and get what you need right now kind of team for the past few years.
They do that, yeah. So that's my biggest concern is that they're just going to be like, well, we need to fill these 3 spots, so we're going to sign 3 30-year-olds to do it. And I'm like,
at premium pricing.
Yeah, it's like, no. Even the one time they're like, let's sign a 25-year-old high-profile free agent. They freaking signed Patrick Queen, of all people. Like, that's who they decided to spend their like, oh, this guy's 25, he's young. It's like, yeah, but he's bad. Like, why are we spending $14 million? That's a whole other conversation. But the point is they do need to be more, one, they need to find more actual like building blocks in the draft, and they also have to be smarter with their free agent additions. Like, they have to, right? And we'll see. They have plenty of room to work with. They're not probably going to sign anyone that I want them to sign. I'm just going to be honest about it. We'll get into that when we're closer for agency, but I hope that they at least sign some people that aren't 32 and bad. That's really, I guess, all I can ask for at this point.
Right.
But
stop signing people at our age range.
Yeah, stop it. Like, I heard an Aaron Jones rumor the other day. No, thank you. For what reason? Just sign Kenneth Gainwell again if you don't want Caleb Johnson to play. Just do that. At least we know he's good. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
That's high praise for you for Gainwell.
Listen, Jacob knows my thoughts on Kenneth Gainwell for like 10 games of the season. Then he started to be good, actually. And I'm like, all right, I can live with this.
You were getting
But-
like me on Jalen Samuel, except you had
Oh my
reason to
gosh.
come around.
Yeah, at least he gave me a reason to come around. There was a point where I'm like, this guy's averaging 3 yards a target. We got to stop throwing the ball. And then all of a sudden, it was like way more effective. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
never mind, we're
We're
good.
good.
Especially when I saw no other receiver was interested in playing football for them. So
Exactly.
who cares? But no, yeah, at this point, for the Steelers, try to emulate as much as you can from what the Seahawks did. It's not easy to do this. If it was, everyone would do it. But
Yeah.
I at least want them to try to be a little bit smarter with how they try to build this team, especially as the defense is aging. You're going to start losing some guys. Try to fill in those spots with young, talented players instead of stopgap players, please. That's kind of the biggest thing I can say, I think.
100%.
Yeah, but that'll do it for us this week. Tommy should be back next week, so we should be back to our regular scheduled programming. But just a reminder for everyone, the Still Curtain podcast premieres on Wednesday evenings at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can check out Josh and Mark's show as well that I also usually appear on. That will be premiering on Mondays most weeks. Thank you all for joining us on the show today. You can follow me at Shayne Kubas on X. Follow Jacob here on the screen. You can see at Jacob Harrison _3. Again, we had a good show today. I think it's always fun to bring on some contributors, even though at this point, again, Jacob, I don't even want to call you a contributor because you are a site expert as well, but you are a contributor to Still Curtain. So appreciate you coming on. Also check us out. Excuse me. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain Steelers podcast. Thanks for listening to the Still Curtain podcast. And again, we will see you guys next time.